Everybody, thanks for watching. So now in this video, we're going to get into a couple of stele, the Merneptah stele and the Tel Dan stele. Very important because a lot of people are confused when they research this stuff. Now, for the most part, what people do is they go ahead and Google the Tel Dan stele or the Merneptah stele, and Google will tell you plainly, yes, it is believed that this is true, and yes, scholars believe this is this. And yes, the Tel Dan stele is proof of the existence of David, which is the one I hate the most, because that's crazy. So you will find exactly what you're looking for if you don't want to dig. It will tell you plain as day. It is proof. Now, common sense will tell you, how is the stela and this inscription that says the house of David proof that King David exists and everything in the Bible is true? How is that? But they immediately go to, it's proof, right? It's evidence, maybe, but it's not proof, but they will tell you it's proof. So we're going to get into this because this is what a lot of people use as their claim. And it's just, it's a haymaker. It's a wild swing. It's a shot in the dark. It has no legs to stand on when you really do the research behind this, which people are not doing. They are not looking at the criticism behind a lot of these things. And they're just not using critical thinking when it comes to this. So we're going to get into this because this is what they're using as their claim to Israel, as, them being in that land and being established for a long time. Because you got to look at the argument with the Palestinians and just look at the argument, period, as far as the validity of these Israelites in Israel, right? The land we call Canaan. And then you got to look at the history. And it's like, where did these people come from? Just out of nowhere, poof. And you have this history that is started, but they can never solidify their history with factual proof, right? It is not solidified. It is all over the place. And they're looking for any type of breadcrumb they can find or any stone to give validity to their existence, right? So we're going to get into this. Now, scholars are in agreement that small, agricultural settlements start popping up around this northern Israel area, right? So we have these small settlements popping up. These people were, moving around. They were nomads. You had nomads coming in and out of different areas. If you can imagine back then, you have people traveling in groups and they're setting up shop and then they're moving on, right? And they're leaving stuff behind. These are people who have an MO. They leave a marker that we can tell certain things that we find pertains to certain people, right? A certain look, people can tell. They documented these people. Now, they are in agreement on this, that these groups started to pop up. Now, what they want to say is we have to absolutely attribute these people to being the biblical Israelites. And it's like, how? So there's no evidence that they were the Israelites. So how are you going to just automatically out of nowhere say these people who we found evidence of were the biblical Jews, right? But we got to understand this area that they call Israel was, of course, inhabited by the Phoenician Canaanites, right? The Phoenician Canaanites was in Canaan. That's what, Canaan is about, the Canaanites. And these people were like merchants. They were travelers. They were traders. They were seafaring people. And they did a lot of trade with the Egyptians. The Egyptians was in and out their territory. They was in and out the Egyptian territory. And they was there. We know they were there. We can prove that the Phoenician Canaanites existed there. Now, according to the Bible, the Hebrews had many skirmishes with the Canaanites, right? They fought them a lot. And the Bible don't say Canaanite. They don't really get into Phoenician Canaanites so much because they don't want you to trace their history. So now the Phoenician Canaanites and the Canaanites are basically the same. And you have these repeated wars between them and the Hebrews, which there's absolutely no proof of. And when you understand the history of the Phoenician Canaanites, which we have documentation, we have proof of these people. I talked about them before. So at no point do they describe the Jews or the Israelites at all, right? So let's keep that on the table. Understand that this land was occupied by many people coming in and out, and the people who we can trace back are talked about by many different civilizations. We get the name Israel, right? First appearance of Israel, and it's Jacob. Jacob is wrestling, and some people say it's with an angel. Some people say it was with God because of what Israel supposedly mean. And he's wrestling with God, the story. And then, basically God says, your name is no longer Jacob. It is Israel because you wrestled against God and you have basically prevailed. And the Hebrew word they use in certain manuscripts is Yizra or Jizra, which means to prevail against or prevail over or to struggle against. And then you add the L at the end, which, L is God. So Israel, Israel, to struggle against God, right? So we know the Phoenicians, that's a Phoenician Canaanite word for God, is El. So, tie that in. So, again, it's just the story we have in the Bible. He wrestles with this dude, this man that comes out of nowhere. It's supposed to be one of the times that I talked about before where God comes down in the form of a man. He wrestles with him, and now your name is Israel, and then we get Israel. Even though they don't really refer to him as Israel, in the rest of the book, they still calling him Jacob, in the book of Genesis. So we have this happen, and then, of course, we know Genesis 32:30, Jacob says, he called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, my life is preserved. And I've got into the whole thing, Peniel, what that means. It's giving you the hint right there. Peniel is God, the seed of God, all that. So we talked about all that, right? So you have this established history that you need to understand as far as with Israel, because that is what we need. That's what the whole Merneptah Stele is pertaining to, is supposedly say Israel. So I'm getting into this history in case you don't understand. So the Merneptah Stele is supposed to say Israel and everything. And, it is one of the things we have to look at and see, okay, if we can find anything pertaining to these people outside of biblical texts, biblical manuscripts, then it would give more validity to the story, but we don't find it. You only find it within the manuscript, right, within the story. And again, people who do a little bit of research on this see so many different things where they're confused about the word evidence. And I gave you guys information on that as well. Evidence does not mean proven or truth or fact. It just means evidence, right? Supporting evidence. Evidence is going to get you to the truth. Talked about that with the court of law. You got to have evidence. You can have a bunch of evidence, but you lose the case because it didn't hold up to scrutiny and cross-examination. Somebody proved you wrong, right? So evidence isn't everything. So when you read and doing the research on this, you're going to find a lot of evidence and them saying that it's evidence when it's not really evidence, right? It's some real final things you have to pay attention to that you can easily Google to get more information on this. And a lot of people don't know how to use Google, but a lot of people do. So I always use it so you guys can see exactly what you need to do and where you can go from there. So it says, this statement means that archaeologists haven't found physical evidence of the very first Israelite settlements. And because the earliest known historical reference to Israel, which is on the Merneptah Stele, only dates back to around 1209 BCE, current archaeological studies cannot be considered reliable for information about Israel before that time period. Think about that. Now they're talking about using this because where they found the Stele, or where they are believing the Israelites were at, they found no remains. They didn't find anything that would, say that these people was here. But again, if you do the wrong research, they'll say, well, this is proof they was there, and it's not proof. And, they haven't found anything. So it's also saying down here, lack of archaeological evidence. There's a gap in the archaeological record regarding the early, and we're going to get into archaeological record because that's important, regarding the early stages of Israelite settlement, meaning no clear physical remains have been discovered to prove their presence in the time before the Merneptah Stele. So again, without that stele, they don't exist. So they need to keep harping on that stele being some type of proof that they existed. Merneptah Stele as the earliest reference. The only documented evidence of Israel currently known is from the Merneptah Stele, an Egyptian inscription from around 1209 BCE. Reliability of archaeological studies. Since current archaeological research doesn't have evidence of Israel before 1209 BCE, it cannot be fully relied upon to provide information about earlier Israelite settlements, right? And if you play this game, if you understand, that's fine for them. That is fine for them. Long as they can say, or anybody says, that the Hebrews existed later than, after, the 2nd century BC, right? Because when you start doing the research, like I said, the Septuagint Greek, that's it. There's absolutely nothing. Everything they find is bogus, bullshit, controversial crap, right? And when you do your research, that's what you're going to run into. But you can very easily Google this stuff, and it'll tell you right there, yeah, this is proof. Yeah, this is evidence, but you got to know how to word it and put things correctly because they're not giving you the full truth. And people don't dig. They'll Google one thing and just leave it alone and think, okay, it's proof, and they'll go with that. You have to look at everything to understand what's really taking place. And common sense will just tell you that's not proof. Now, as I said, the Phoenician Canaanites, we know what's in that land. We know that land belonged to the Egyptian Empire, the land we call Israel. But when you go and look at maps, the maps will show you the Canaanite land, right? The territory, which encompasses what we know as Israel. But they'll also show you Israel, and they'll break it up, right? And it's confusing to a lot of people because they think it's two separate places. But Israel dips in and out of Canaanite territory, but it's basically still Canaanite territory, which was ancient Egyptian territory. I talked about this in Ancient History Volume 1, I believe it is, Ancient History Volume 1, when I got into the whole thing about Tyre and, the Greeks giving the Phoenicians their name, Phoenicians, talking about the Morak shell, the purple people, because of the Morak shell, when they went in the water to get that shell out, because it gave them that Tyrian dye. It's the royal dye that they use for the purple and scarlet for royalty, right? And they're known for that, the Phoenicians. So when they used to get in there and get those Morak shells out, they would be covered in that purple dye and it would be purple. So they call them purple people, right? Long story. But you have that history. So you have that history of these Phoenicians and people understanding who these Phoenicians is to the point where we can go in detail about purple dye and stuff like that. How is it that the Hebrews, the Israelites, had wars with these people and nobody never heard about it? Nobody talked about it. I mean, think about it. They had wars with these people and it was not written about. Nobody said nothing. The Phoenicians didn't say anything. They occupied supposedly the same land, but there's no evidence or nothing from the Phoenicians talking about a group of people called the Israelites, right? Who's walking around with the Ark of the Covenant in a damn tabernacle. Now, for those of us who do real actual research, you know about archaeological records, right? Because we have a record on every people that exists, and this is how it gets into the proven category. Understand? So just think about the archaeological record the same way you look at the empirical research. Because through empirical research is how we prove something is true. Through the archaeological record is how we prove something is true as well. So if you exist within the archaeological record where we can trace it back, we're talking about that encompasses not just artifacts, but bodies, right? Descriptive bodies that we can prove belong to a certain group of people, right? It encompasses a lot. But we don't find that when it comes to these Israelites. So I'm going to give you another easy one. It says here, the archaeological record is the physical evidence of past societies, including artifacts, bones, and other remains. It's a key concept in archaeology, which is the study of human history through the analysis of these remains, right? So it says here, archaeologists haven't found substantial remains of Israelites from the initial period, largely because during that time, the Israelites were likely nomadic and considered a small, marginalized group, making them difficult to identify in the archaeological record. Now, this is one of those things that I said, but you'll Google it and it'll give you some bullshit. First of all, one, the Israelites was not small, right? And you can look in the Bible where they tell you it was like supposedly 1 million of them. And you've seen all the depictions, like, look at this. So if these depictions are based on the Bible and how the Bible describes them existing in those numbers, there is no way nobody saw 1 million people walking with the Ark of the Covenant and a goddamn tabernacle, right? The stuff that makes up a tabernacle, whatever. We're talking about people carrying their entire civilization, right? So men, women, and children, almost 1 million people or more traveling. Somebody would have seen these people and documented these people, but we find nothing. People would have died along the way. We know about them splitting up and going to other places. There's nothing. We find nothing, right? What we find is bullshit artifacts that is never proven to pertain to them, that could pertain to anyone. It's never proven to pertain to the biblical Jews, the biblical Israelites. And in my earlier research, like this is something that I looked at because I had that mindset for a little bit, like, they found the Stele, like it had the name on it. And to me, I'm thinking it's going to be clear cut saying Israel to where it's not debated at all. But then it's like other things you got to look at and just like, okay, There's mystery surrounding it. There's a problem surrounding it. It's the way it was handled. It's the chalk they use. It's a lot of different things that come into play when you start studying it. And it's like, well, you know what? It's one of those things you got to go see for yourself. And a lot of the researchers and scholars recommend it because when you get up close on it, which we're going to get into this in a second, you can see what they're talking about. And when you start to understand the Egyptian hieroglyphs and how some of them look similar, you can understand what the problem was and what happened here. So yeah, when I went to go look at it, I got up close on it. I got to talk to people about it. I examined it. And luckily, they have the plexiglass over it, but you can get right up on it and you can look and really see the so-called inscription and really understand, what the stela talks about and what the people at the museum actually believe. But I'm going to get into what other researchers talk about because people keep saying that, all scholars are in agreement. All scholars are in agreement. The scholars are never in agreement, right? It's certain people who they select and say that they're in agreement. And then when you read any type of archaeological work or any type of research, they'll say they're in agreement, but they're not in agreement. Like when you say they're in agreement, it's going to be something that you understand, and you don't need a video like this to get the information because it's going to be a consensus around it as far as proof, archaeological proof, and it's going to be undoubtable, right? This is not the case. And just the whole findings around it should be suspect to anybody anyway. So it says, error or forgery on the stele of Merneptah, known as Israel Stele. It says, the objective of this article are twofold. First of all, it presents one information omitted in chapter 11 of my last book in French language, The Lost Fresco and the Bible. Then it denounces an error or more probably the forgery of an archaeological document of the greatest importance, right? Let's get into this. Now it says here, line 27. The hieroglyphic reading of the word translated in Israel is, and this is going to be replete throughout here. I'm not going to keep saying it, but this is the word it's using because it's different words. And in my book, I largely extended on its meaning. I have demonstrated that IISIIRIAR is in fact an Egyptian sentence meaning those exalted because of their sin. Pharaohs Ramses II and Merneptah used this sentence when talking about the exiled Akhenaten followers forced to quit Egypt. The name of this people changed to Israel through the alteration of the letter R to I. It says, I had, however, omitted a detail discussed in this present article. It relates to the sentence Yenoam became non-existent, which directly precedes the mention IISIIRIAR, as I will show you it here. This translation is entirely false because it results from the falsification of one hieroglyph sign. To begin with, let us look at the transliteration on line 27 of the Stele, published in 1909. We notice that in the sentence Yenoam became non-existent, a group of hieroglyphs is not translated, but is marked SIC. The transcription of the hieroglyph represented by the bird vulture is thus doubtful. Just like the sentence Yenoam became non-existent, consequently, the significance of the remainder of the line, in particular the part comprising IISIIRIAR, Israel, is also doubtful. And you're going to see right here what it's talking about. And it says here the tracing with chalk. The engraving of the hieroglyphs on this stele is rather coarse. This explains why, since its discovery by Flinders Petire in 1896, one overtraced them with a chalk stick in order to highlight them and to facilitate their reading. Chalk tracing on the hieroglyphics of the line containing SIC photograph of the original, reading from right to left. The drawing with chalk of the vulture AA is precise. However, it carries the mention doubtful reading SIC. When I began the study of this stele at the end of the 90s, I wondered why this vulture transcription posed problem and was not translated. I did not find any answer in the literature, although there are nearly 200 articles published on the Israel stele. So understand what he's saying. They just skipped over this like it wasn't even there. They said nothing about this. During our last visit to the Cairo Museum, I had asked my son Ralph to photograph this particular part of the stele under the best possible conditions, by accentuating any contrast in order to visualize the true engraving of this hieroglyph SIC. Error or forgery. In the photograph below, one compares the letter AA, the vulture, in the upper line 26 marked A with the same letter in line 27 SIC marked B. Tracing with chalk of the hieroglyph AA in the upper line 26 and the one in line 27 containing SIC, photograph of the original reading from right to left. We notice that for the letter marked A, the white chalk drawing follows perfectly the engraving of the hieroglyph, the vulture. On the contrary, for the letter SIC marked B, the chalk drawing of the neck and the head of the vulture continues outside the carving. Thus, the engraving does not correspond to the letter AA. It is a forgery. Now let us look closer to the engraving of the letter marked B, SIC, and highlight in red the contour of the engraving in the letter SIC. Now, let us look closer to the engraving of the letter marked B, SIC, and highlight it in red the contour of the engraving of this letter SIC. The red contour of the engraving of the hieroglyph suggests that an owl, i.e. the letter M, and not the letter AA. We can now propose a reading of the missing word that was not translated until now. We read REMM, and we translate into tears. New reading and its consequences. The hieroglyphics group MTEMWUN may be separated in two parts due to the presence of the papyrus roller preceding the rabbit, WUN. The sentence genome became non-existent, is changed into what it says there, and the new translation suggests genome tears are finished existing the people. New translation of line 27 of the Merneptah Stele with highlighted punctuations, rectangle. And I highlighted up there, as you can see, they are very similar, the owl and the bird. All you have to do is, if you cut that head off, you can put whatever you want right there, or they'll basically look the same. The falsification of the letter M, owl, into the letter AA, vulture, was probably the effect of the discovery of the stele. Flinders Peter in 1896 from the beginning, he and his colleagues traced this hieroglyph with chalk in this way, because in their mind, Pharaoh Merneptah must have attacked and destroyed Canaan nations in his chase of the people of Exodus, Israel. In the edited line 27, the people, which they say is Israel, are not devastated. On the contrary, they exist. This new translation is in agreement with the teaching of Egyptology. One knows that the armies of Merneptah neither attacked nor crushed the nation and people of Canaan, since their actions was limited to Libya and the northwest of Egypt. Merneptah quite simply makes the report of the general situation of Egypt and its neighbors, Canaan included. The mention, line 27, according to which Israel does not have any more cereals, thus resulted from the falsification of the text. It relates rather to the people mentioned in the next sentence, namely Karu, i.e. the Hittites. This interpretation is proven by archaeology. It is known that Merneptah dispatched cereals from Egypt to the starving Hittites, Kata and Karu, victims of a famine. Nevertheless, the chalk trace was maintained on the Merneptah Stele until today. To my knowledge, no Egyptologist nor biblical historian ever called into question the reading, rather the non-reading, of this forged hieroglyph. Now, a lot of people never heard of this because they didn't look. They Googled and simply read what they wanted to read, and they didn't look further. They didn't look at the criticisms. And you have to look at criticisms because that's how it's done when we're doing research. You have scholars who agree, scholars who disagree. And you got to understand that scholars who mostly agree are going to be attached to the church. That's how it goes. These are people that is bought and paid for by the church. When you start researching these people, the biblical scholars, a lot of them are religious, a lot of them are tied to the church. And that's why their accounts can't really be attested to, because they're biased. And you have independent researchers, when they get their hands on things, when they're able to study, they come out with the truth. Either they'll agree, or they'll say inconclusive, or they say, hey, this is right, or what have you. And there are very few things in science pertaining to the Bible that scholars agree on. It's almost none, to be honest with you. But you got to look at this to understand this Stele. People want to claim says Israel does not say Israel. You look, it's not just this researcher, it's a bunch of other researchers and professors who have come to the same conclusion. And this and the whole, scholarly community has already been debunked to us because he's proven what he says. Now, when you go and look there, you can see the chalk line, and right there, the owl head is sort of cut off. So if you're tracing it to try to get it to look, so you can read it, all you have to do is extend that line, and you can make it look just like the vulture, the other bird, and then you can change the wording in that. But this is basically what was done. But no matter what, even still with that, none of it translates into Israel. None of it translates into Israel, right? It's just translate into an area or province that they believe is speaking of Israel, which that area and province basically belongs to where the Phoenician Canaanites was living, not to some people called Israelites. And this is what they used to say, well, you got to give it to the Israelites because it had to be them, right? Because the Bible says so, as if the Bible has been proven. Now, my thing is this. One of the first things I want to look for is, okay, this could say Israel. And that could just mess up a little thing, a little bit of things date-wise in my research. But here's the thing. Can we find that same inscription anywhere in Egypt? No, we can't. So nowhere in the entirety of Egypt do we find that inscription that supposedly says Israel in Egypt. So you would think with the history the Bible tells us about the, correspondence connections between the Egyptians and the so-called Israelites, you would think we will find this inscription in many places throughout Egypt. We do not. It is the only place we find it surrounded by controversy. So again, it's up to you if you want to believe that nonsense or not. I tend to believe what this researcher is saying, and it's no way possible. Now, had we found this inscription in other places, then I would be like, okay, it's possible. They could be talking about the Jews, but we're talking about the 13th century BCE. Come on, these people didn't exist. If you follow my research and everything I talked about with these people, you know what happened. Okay, so let's move on to the Tel Dan Stele. Tel Dan Stele, same type of situation, same thing, to where there's absolutely no real proof or things to really solidify what they found. Now, they don't really elaborate on the story of the finding of this stele, but when you understand the story, it's completely suspect from the beginning when you understand how it was found and that it's a secondary finding, right? So what do I mean by that? One, the story goes about, let's just say what the stele talks about, king of Amram, which is basically Syria, who is talking about defeating these, so-called Israel kingdoms and the house of David, what have you. And that's what it's supposed to be talking about. But where they found the stele is the suspect part because they found it in a wall, right? So they found it used as basically a rock, a piece of construction, you might as well say, to put in a wall. Now, we're talking about somebody taking a piece of a stele with writing on it and putting it in a wall and using it as a rock, just like any ordinary rock. I mean, what does that sound like to you? So now you got to make up your mind and you got to believe that somebody was looking for rocks to build this wall. They found this rock. It had Aramaic writing on it, right? And they decided to use this rock when there's a bunch of other rocks around, as you can see here. Decided to use this rock to, be a part of this wall. Now, some people would say, well, maybe they was trying to hide it, right? Or maybe they're trying to get rid of it. Well, if you wanted to hide it or for it to not be known, you would just destroy the rock. I mean, you can just chisel the words out, and that's the end of it. You're going to worry about somebody finding and discovering it, which is what happened, and then, revealing what it says. So if you wanted to hide it, you would just destroy it. That would make more sense, or chisel the words out, right? It's more likely that they found this rock that was probably being used as a stele at some point, or going to be used, or could be used. It probably was smooth, and they chiseled what they chiseled into it. Now, this first fragment, which is, then they call it fragment A, was the biggest piece, was found first, right? And then that was 1993? 1993, right? Took them all this time to find it. 93, they found it, right? Tupac was still alive. So they found this in 1993, and then in 94, they found the other two fragments, right? Fragment B1 and B2, right? So you have to believe that story, that this was just found embedded in a wall and, a person just put it there because whatever reason. So this is what they call in archaeology a secondary finding. And you can Google this. A lot of people know about this. If you study this whole thing, you already know what I'm talking about. And there's a lot of researchers who don't really go with the findings because of this. Because again, as I just said, somebody could have just found a smooth rock and chiseled the words into it, basically, right? So now it's saying here, the Tel Dan inscription was found on secondary sources, meaning the fragments of the stele were not discovered in their original location, but were found reused in a later construction, indicating they had been moved and repurposed after the original inscription was created. It says this is a common occurrence in archaeological digs. Yeah, usually pertaining to anything biblical. Now let's go to Lamech, because, of course, he's one of the leading researchers on this whole thing and one of the critics. Page 41, Lamech, 1998. The inscription is kept in a kind of pigeon, which, it's not a bird. A pigeon is basically like a language that we're going to use because me and you don't speak the same language, right? It's almost like a lingua franca, right? Kind of pigeon Aramaic. Sometimes looking more like a kind of mixed language in which Aramaic and Phoenician linguistic elements are jumbled together. And this phraseology, nevertheless, closely resembling especially the Mishnah inscription and the Aramaic Zukur inscription from Apophis near Aleppo. The narrow links between the Tel Dan inscription and these two inscriptions are of a kind that has persuaded at least one major specialist into believing that the inscription is a forgery. This cannot be left out of consideration in advance because some of the circumstances surrounding its discovery may speak against it being genuine. Other examples of forgeries of this kind are well known, and clever forgers have cheated even respectable scholars into accepting something that is obviously false. It's just like the Dead Sea Scrolls that's in museums across the world. As I said, if people want to believe PhDs and all that, they lie just as well. I understand this is important for them because they have to establish some type of claim of Egypt, right? Now, it's simply talking to House of David. Now, it's just so much around that inscription, but, none of it really translates to House of David conclusively, if you understand. But they need this because it gives them more claim to that land. The inscription doesn't prove David exists. It doesn't prove that everything in the Bible about David is true. But they will tell you clear as day that this fragment is proof of the existence of King David in the Bible. How? And this is what people are going off of. So this is why I do what I do. Because you guys got to understand so much misinformation out there and people are really following this and they are cocky with it too. They will argue you down. All they did was read from Google where it says that this is proof and it's enough for them. It's enough for them. I've been through this before, man. I've been through this before doing research and I know how it is. I found a lot of stuff that said this is definitive. And when I found it, I didn't stop. I say, you know what? I want to hear what other people have to say. I want to be critical about it because I want to get to the truth. Because you can believe something. Everybody's story sounds true. And it's always another side to the story. And you can be believing somebody and be banging with them, riding with them and all that. Then you found out later they was wrong. They got you into a whole bunch of bullshit. It was lying the whole time, right? But you just went with them and didn't see the other side of the story. You always have to got to look at both sides. Now, for people who just like to argue and want to be right, this is how they get shut up because they don't want to do no research. But you have to go and look. The main thing I keep hearing from everybody is scholars are in agreement. Well, all the scholars believe. Well, most of the scholars believe as if that's proof. I don't care how many scholars agree with it. I don't care. Now, you have to weigh whether what they're saying as far as their agreement fits, is valid. What more proof do you have to go with it? Or is the critics or criticism against it more valid to you? Now, you can choose which one you like, but come on. Common sense should tell you which one it is. So for people who believe that all scholars are in agreement, they are not. And it says here, according to Anton Rainey, the presence or absence of word dividers is normally inconsequential for interpretation. Word dividers as well as compound words are used elsewhere in the inscription and generally in West Semitic languages. So it is possible that the phrase was treated as a compound word combining a personal name with a relational noun. Makatiak argues that readings other than House of David are unlikely. Joseph Garfinkel has been vocally critical of alternate translation, categorizing them as suggestions that now seem ridiculous. The Hebrew BWTDWD should be read not as the House of David, but as a place named BETDWD in parallel to the well-known place named Ashdod or Ashdod. Other minimalist suggestions include House of Uncle, House of Kettle, and House of Beloved. Francesca Stavrakopoulou, who I've been following for years, she's awesome. If you ever seen her before, she is a researcher, a historian, all kinds of stuff. Her credentials are crazy. And she's also an atheist. So that's where you find an atheist in this field. But this woman is a professor at a university in England. She does a lot. She does not believe Moses existed. She does not believe David existed. She think a person named Jesus may have existed, but not the biblical Jesus. So it's people like this who you got to find who a lot of researchers don't know exist because they shut her up. But Francesca Stavrakopoulou states that even if the inscription refers to a House of David, it testifies neither to the historicity of David nor the existence of a 9th century BCE Judahite kingdom. Now, I talked about this in a previous video. If that video is still on YouTube, I'm not sure, but it was old. And I broke all those stelas down. I crushed those stelas. You guys know one of the reasons when I went to Kemet last time I was there was to go and look at a lot of stelas. I researched them all. I have pictures with a lot of them. Now, one of the things you ask yourself is, okay, we find stelas with the ancient Greeks, with the ancient Egyptians, right? With the Assyrians, the Babylonians, what have you. We found them in Syria. But why is it that the so-called Israelites didn't keep any stone stelas, right? Moses came down from, Mount Sinai with the supposedly 10 Commandments in stone, and he broke them. But it's giving you the understanding that these Israelites, if they existed along with the ancient Egyptians and these other people who wrote stelas, who made stelas, they understood what this stuff was, right? And they didn't write none on their own. They could have even used papyri. They could have used what the Egyptians used and used papyri to write this stuff down if they wanted this to be a word that was, traveled with and known throughout the ages. Now, supposedly, the Levites or what have you, the people who was in charge of writing these manuscripts and carrying this word around did so. But we don't have those manuscripts. We don't have any proof of that. But there's proof of, well, not proof, but there is talk that there was a writing. And if there was supposedly a writing, we should have it. We don't have it. Now, it's real easy to go back and look at history and see what happened, which I get into that a lot, the history of all of this. Talking about the Ptolemies, talking about what happened. Even if the letters of Orestes was true and Ptolemy II Philadelphus commissioned these Hebrew elders to do this translation of the Hebrew law into Greek, that would give the Hebrews an understanding that the Greeks want a manuscript with our laws on it. Maybe we should have one of our own. So we can have one that's established and definitive just in case they try to change our laws or our word or our history, what have you, right? The Torah, the Tanakh, right? The Pentateuch. This is supposed to be their religious writings. Why would they not have this solidified, concrete, right? We don't find it. So they have to shuffle and dance and whatever little thing they find, they want to pertain it to the Israelites, but we don't find nothing. Archaeology has scraped these places, man. There's no fucking Hebrew or Israelite bodies up there. Think about in the Bible how many times God destroyed these people. Where are the graves? Where are these people didn't leave nothing? Nothing. We don't find anything pointing to these people. And everything we do find is bullshit. Now, you can go to any civilization that we know that was proven to exist. We can go to the Incas, we can go to the Mayans, we can go to Africa, we can go to Asia, we can go to people who we know is still walking around today and find ancient remnants of their existence. And for the ancient Egyptians to have existed long as they have, for the Sumerians to have been around as long as they have, right? Everything that we find, all the carvings and the writings, you mean to tell me these people existed and did so much and they left nothing? It's bullshit. I gave you guys the story and the history on it. Now, I don't expect any Bible-believing people to accept what I'm saying in this video, but that's on you. This is for people who do actual research and want to know what's out there. I could have got a lot deeper into this whole subject, but I'm not. It's just too much because it's just, to me, it's just like, come on. Common sense should push you to that, understanding of what happened. Obviously, it's forged. Obviously, it just ding, 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 little chisel to make these marks there. And that's what happened. That's what happened. And they used it and they blew it up because, hey, we need to get people more excited about Israel. Because guess what? When you go to Tel Dan, when you go to that area in Israel, it's a tourist attraction. You can go right to Tel Dan. They cover that thing up. People go there and take pictures. It's a tourist attraction. Just like Golgotha is the whole path that Jesus walked. It's a tourist attraction. Go there and bring me your money. Go take a look. Go to the wall if you want to. And you can see all this stuff for a price, right? It's bullshit. When they were selling off pages or leaves of the Dead Sea Scrolls, I knew it was bullshit. So come on. If this is your religious writings, right? Your people's stuff, why are you making money off of it? Why are you desecrating it? Why are you disrespecting it in that way and allowing people who don't believe or don't follow what you believe to come there and, do all this stuff? Same thing I said about the Arabs in Kemet. If that was your people, you wouldn't be digging up their bodies and putting it on display for money. You wouldn't be digging these people out of the ground, disturbing their graves, taking their stuff they was buried with, disrespecting them if that was your people. That's how we know it's not their people. So I wanted to put this out real quick. Feel free. Go look up all this, do your own research. Again, you're going to run into things that says this is proof. And you accept that, you accept it. Show me the proof. Okay, what proof besides the actual stela itself do you have to prove that this is what you say it is? And how does the existence of this stela somehow prove everything that's in the biblical text? It doesn't. It does not, right? So it's all suspect. It's all stuff you got to really do your research on and pay attention to, right? It's up to you guys. But people asked about this, so I wanted to put it out, and I forget what video I got into a little bit deeper about the Tel Dan stela before. I think about both, but it's out there. So, thanks for watching. Links in the description. A lot of people asked about the society. The sale is still up. I put it up. You got like this weekend only to go ahead and take advantage of it. I show you guys, when you get into the society, I give you guys 3 new incomes. I show you guys how to make 3 new incomes. It's not no bullshit. It's a nice way for you to make money. You could quit your job doing these things. I break it down to you just like I break down my videos. You're going to make money. So whatever you pay for this, you're going to make right back super fast and then some. So I'm helping people out with this. A lot of people are already making money off of it. I'm building a lot to help people who have these sites up, how to get them out and promote them more and make a lot more money off of it. So take advantage of it while it's still available right here. I'm making it easier for you guys. Take advantage of it, join the society, and just, take advantage of the information while it's still available. It's not going to be around forever or be available at this level forever. So take advantage of it now while you can, right? Take advantage of it. Link is in the description. Thanks for taking the time to watch. I'll see you guys later. Peace.